welcome to Solar Power World Solar Speaks Live, powered by UNIRAC at Intersolar North America 2015. I'm Kathie Zipp, and today we are speaking with Dr. Paul Basore, Principal Engineer for NREL's National Center for Photovoltaics. And I know he'll have a lot of things to share because he has contributed to the establishment of photovoltaic research and development facilities on 3 continents, and he's lived on several of them, right? He is also the developer of widely used software tools for solar cell simulation and solar cost estimations. So we're excited to have him here with us, and Paul, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kathy.
So I understand that you've had 30 years of experience in the PV industry. So again, I look forward to hearing what you have to share based on that experience. So let's start with what first attracted you to solar, and what was the industry like when you started?
I have to go quite a ways back for that, obviously. But I can remember it pretty distinctly because I was in high school and had just gotten my driver's license, and just a few months later, all of a sudden, there was no gasoline available to put in the car. This is in the 70s. They called it the Arab oil embargo at the time. And so it gave me the idea that energy was actually going to be an important thing in the future. And so, although I was too young to do anything about it yet, it sort of set me on a path of trying to do something. And pretty soon, I figured out that solar was a good way to do it. I managed to get a fellowship to go off to MIT for graduate work, and so while I was there, I actually worked on energy storage for solar systems. The trouble was I was quite a few years ahead of my time. This is now becoming a hot topic, but for a long time, people didn't worry about storage with PV systems. Back then, you know, solar was used like for remote cabins or things like street lights.
Mostly off-grid kind of type application.
In fact, one of my nightmares is I would wake up and think, oh my gosh, I'm going to spend my whole career working on this stuff, and all it's ever going to amount to is allowing people to have billboards illuminated in the desert at night. So, but obviously, things went better than that.
Yeah.
We contribute a lot of that to the fact that, you know, as the industry scaled up, costs have come down, and people didn't really appreciate that when we started. I mean, you sort of just go into it and say, well, costs are really high, and we have no idea how we're going to get them down because we're doing it pretty much as best we know how. But darn, you know, as you go along and you double, triple, quadruple, 10 times the production globally, and prices came down, it just opens up more and more markets, and now we have the large global enterprise we have today.
So it really paid off.
I was lucky. I made a good choice. I think,
yeah. So solar is definitely more than billboards today.
Yes,
so that's exciting. So since you've worked in both the public and private sector, can you compare and contrast the roles that each has in the research and development of solar technology?
That's a good question. So obviously, each part of those sectors is better at doing different things. I think the public sector is needed to help sort of guide the way. And I say this because investors won't really invest in something unless they have a pretty good idea that it's going to get them some money.
Sure.
So that's where the public sector comes in. And this is in the form of R&D, but other things too, like setting standards, you know, so that everybody makes modules kind of the same size and shape, and these things really reduce costs. But the private sector is really more efficient at the actual bottom line of trying to inch up the performance and whittle out the cost of the product as you go along. And it's appropriate to support that, even with public funds, but industry probably does a better job of doing it. Now, of course, now I'm working at a national lab, so I'm in at least temporarily now, in the public sector. And this is an interesting point because really it's the taxpayers that are our customer. And the question is, what can you do for the taxpayers? And most of them simply want solar to be successful. And so anything we can do to help encourage that is on our ticket.
What do you think that people want? When you say solar is successful, what do you think they envision, the public envisions as successful, the taxpayers?
Well, of course, everyone would love to have something you can paint on the wall of your house and have it produce the electricity for your house. I call it the solar paint vision. I think that's going to be a long time coming. But so you have to sort of give people something that's in that direction, but is actually achievable in our lifetimes, right? And so I think most people would be happy if they could look around and say that solar represents 10–20% of the electricity used in the country. You know, you pretty much would stand back and say, yeah, that's significant. You know, that's actually making a difference. That's probably, you know, that would be more solar than what we have nuclear today, for example. I think if we had that, that's a good goal.
It'd be a pretty good goal. Yeah. So let's look into the future a little bit more. What are some of the most exciting developments that you see that will impact PV over the next several years?
Okay, time frame's important. So I'll look at thinking about
immediate
the next
future.
Yeah, the immediate future of a few years. And
okay.
People are often overly optimistic here. It always takes longer to get stuff done than you think it's going to take, right?
That applies to a lot of things.
Yeah, almost everything.
Yeah.
We're going through a transition now where, you know, the cost of modules has dropped precipitously, you know, over the last 3 years or so, and it's made people suddenly wake up and realize that there's other things in solar than just the module, and that some of those other things are actually maybe now the more important place to put your time and effort. And so, the hot topic for the next few years is probably going to be integration with energy storage in some form. Now, exactly what that looks like is hotly debated now. It could start to take the form of electric cars. I mean, people don't think about that. There's a battery in your electric car that could be indirectly used to store solar energy. If you like charge the car up while you're at work, off of a solar panel at work, and then you drive it home, essentially the sun is the thing that's powering your car,
Sure.
and the battery in the car is actually serving the energy storage function. That's an intriguing possibility. But there's a lot of other ones, and of course, you know, there's a number of companies right now that are trying to dive into this. Everyone is still searching for the right combination of pieces and parts to actually make this work cost effectively. But I think over the top 5-year time frame, we're going to see this play out and see what works, what doesn't work. But it's really going to, I think, open some new avenues, because people won't be simply limited to hooking the thing up to the power grid and having to sell the power to the utility, who may or may not want to buy it. If you know you can use it, it also, I think, appeals to people's sense of self-sufficiency, which is kind of an American ideal at the core.
Yeah, self-independence. But yeah, like you said, it's a lot of little parts and pieces and trial and error to find something that will work in storage. I know yesterday during the keynote, they said that it's not one big innovation, it's a lot of little ones. So maybe we'll see many more of those over the next few years. So what else is NREL working on that might become important to solar in the longer term?
On the technology side, which I think this is where it's heading.
Sure.
Again, there's things that we're supporting indirectly, but they're really being done in industry. And these are things like the switch from traditional silicon solar cells to, say, what's called PERC solar cells. That's kind of the latest acronym, passive emitter and rear cells. It adds 1 or even 2 efficiency points to the module efficiency, which is not huge, but you know, it helps. Every little bit helps.
Yep.
Our role there is largely in helping to make sure the industry is going in a direction where these things will continue to last 20, 30 years like they're supposed to. But then you get to where we have to say, okay, well, beyond that, what's going to happen? And there's a lot of interest in putting a coating on the front of the cells that would significantly boost the efficiency. Now, doing that at a price or cost that's reasonable is a challenge, and that's why most of industry is not working on that too much right now. Whether that top coating, at NREL we're looking at several different possible materials. There's some materials that are fairly expensive now but are inherently high efficiency, and then they're the big challenge for us is how would you put them on the surface cheaply. And there's other materials, and those, by the way, go under the general title of 3-5 materials. So some other time we can explain what that means.
We'll get into that in the next video.
Then there's the possibility of putting something on the front that's actually quite inexpensive, but might not have the efficiency or durability that's needed to make it be really a contributor. And you know, the hot topic there is something called perovskites. People haven't really figured out how to make these things, you know, durable and high efficiency enough when they're put on top of a silicon cell. But I could see that happening. It's a possibility. In something more like the 5 to 10 year time frame, we'll find out if that works. The thing that's interesting is whenever you talk about these ideas of putting something on top of the silicon cell, if the thing on top then, over a period of say 10 to 20 years, actually becomes good enough, you don't need the silicon cell anymore. And so you can envision a long-term trend where you put something on top of the silicon, makes it a little bit better, but also a little more efficient, more expensive. You know, the trade-off is slightly beneficial. Then the top gets better and better until you say we don't need the bottom anymore, and then you end up with something that doesn't look at all like what you started with, but it actually got there as an evolutionary process.
Right.
The history of solar has been that when people come in and say they're going to do something disruptive, it usually doesn't work, frankly, because it's such a big industry now that it's hard to disrupt it. It's much more likely that people will cause it to evolve in a better direction over time.
Well, and which is kind of a fun question. So what are you most excited about this week at the show? I know we're just in day one here, so it could be something that happened today. I know you spoke this morning, or something that you're just excited to see the rest of the week.
I'm looking around the show. I guess the thing that's exciting for me is, as someone who's been in the business a long time, is how much interest and activity there is around the installation side of the industry. I mean, for many, many years, we come to a show like this, and it was about the people who actually make the solar cells.
Yeah.
And that's fun, and it's, you know, as an electrical engineer, which I am, you know, that's at the heart of my interest. But to see people who are actually putting the things out in the field and in very large quantities, you know, all over the country, that's exciting for me. It's kind of the culmination of 30 years of work from my perspective.
Sure. That's great. All right, well, that's all the questions I have for you, Paul. So that wraps up this edition of Solar Speaks Live at Intersolar North America. And I do want to thank you again so much for being with us. So thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
And be sure to stop by throughout the show and see more interviews with more solar experts. So thank you so much, everyone.